never know where life will lead us or what may hinder us along the way. But while every day can feel like one big question mark, it doesn't have to. With the right insights, strategies, and solutions from Western and Southern Financial Group, together we can look ahead to leave the unknown behind.
I mean, what's Pro Football Focus doing? Last week they had Brady. This week they got Brady.
We're literally doing it differently from everybody else.
As a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Ready to get into it?
Yeah.
All right. We're going team by team.
I would be very careful about slinging stone.
Am I going to get sued?
We got legal on this?
I like football season, all the things that go with it.
And the PFF NFL podcast, Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson. We're live here on YouTube. And it's a very special show. We've got the director of the Reese Senior Bowl, Jim Nagy, on the line, as they say.
On hold, right?
On hold.
Yeah.
He's just waiting for us.
Do we have good hold music?
I don't know, but what I was going to say, no banter today.
Okay.
We can't waste any time. We're going to get right to Jim. So we're going to start by reminding you that the PFF NFL podcast is sponsored by Western and Southern Financial Group. While you focus on your roster moves, Western and Southern helps advance your money moves. You're buying your first home, you're planning to start a family, you're wondering how to make your money grow? Well, Western and Southern's playbook of life insurance, investment, and retirement solutions helps you rest assured on game day. Team up to understand needs and address goals with a game plan built just for you. Get started at westernsouthern.com/PFF. You got anything else you want to say in the intro?
No. We're getting right into it.
We're right into it. Yeah. All right. Well, let's bring in Jim Nagy, as I mentioned, the director of the Reese Senior Bowl. Jim, welcome to the show.
Morning, guys.
So we appreciate having you here, and what we've been really interested in doing is getting people that know the draft inside and out, and having just a good discussion, maybe some stuff that they're not going to hear anywhere else. So. Let's start with you, with Sam, your theory. You have a Senior Bowl theory. We could start with that and then get into some of the mechanics of everything that Jim's doing down there.
I mean, anyone that listens...
I can't wait to hear this.
It's not that exciting. He's building it up way more than it deserves to be. For years, anyone that listens to this podcast knows that one of my favorite sort of data points or just pieces of information about prospects pre-draft is I think it's a really important thing when guys dominate at the Senior Bowl. If you go to an all-star setting and you show up and you look obviously better than the people you're going up against, that has to be a really good sign that you're going to be a good player in the NFL when the competition steps up and when everybody is an all-star. So as an impartial, party in all this, what's your take on that?
Yeah. I'm so unbiased on this one. No, I think there is a lot to that. Honestly, just going back to my time in the NFL, I always put a lot of emphasis on the All-Star games, and yeah, it's good on good, which you get for it, on college tape, but not all the time. And especially, you see some of the guys that are the biggest risers coming out of Senior Bowl week are the small school players, where they get an opportunity to kind of shine against the Big Ten guys and the SEC guys, But even more importantly than the physical stuff that comes through during the week, to me, it's the guys that they're making a statement, right? Especially some of these guys that are being projected to go up high before the Senior Bowl. Guys that are talked about being late first-round picks, mid-first-round picks, early second-round picks. I'm sure they have people in their ear telling them, hey, why don't you just play it safe, protect, your position right now. And if you're an early second-round pick, so be it. That's great. But again, and there's so many great takeaways. You guys are down there every year. You get inside the drills. You're down in the field, and you see how guys respond, the body language, facial expressions. So, stuff you can't take off the tape. I think that's what the teams are all looking for, is the stuff they can't see on the college tape. And again, there's so many great takeaways when you're down there and in the mix, like you guys are every year, that really help. That really can really help a player.
How do you weigh all that stuff, either as a scout, general evaluator, as a general manager? How do you weigh all of that, right? Because I know a lot of our listeners, and I've been of this mind before, it's like the tape's the tape, trust the tape, right? I mean, you've got 40 games for some players, 12 games for other players, right? You have so much data in what you see on film. How do you weigh everything that happens after the season, between the All-Star games, the Combine, and all the interviews? How does that get weighed in the entire process?
Yeah, so much information, Steve. I mean, that's how do you filter all this information and all these data points like you're talking about? I'll say this: I know, just talking to guys in the league right now, what they're really trying to drill down on, probably even more so the last couple of years than in the past, is which guys truly love football. They're worried about just the dedication, the competitiveness part. We're seeing guys. The portal aspect of college football right now. And again, it's been great for some players, right? It's the opportunity's great. I don't think anyone bemoans the portal process, but for some of these guys that are kind of bouncing every year, you question, does this guy really want to stick it out and compete? So I think those are some of the takeaways right now as we work through the All-Star games and the Combine and the Pro Days. One of the buzzwords on the road this year and the past couple of years has been like the a la carte workout. You're seeing guys kind of pick and choose what they're good at. I might be good in the jumps, but not so good in the shuttles. So I'll do the jumps and I won't do the shuttles. So it's the guys that really go through the entire process, whether it be all-star games and not just the practice week, but playing in the actual game. I think we saw more of that this year from Senior Bowl all the way down to Hula Bowl. Guys just not participating on game day. And then on pro days and combine, like who's doing all this stuff? I'm hearing more and more from GMs that they're really weighing that more heavily this year.
How's the landscape changing at the moment with the transfer portal, with COVID threw a wrench into the works where we got a ton of guys staying back for that extra year. Are you seeing kind of a difference in the number, the talent, the sort of level of guys that are staying for their senior seasons, maybe because they spent, like Matt Landers is an interesting guy this year from Arkansas, right? Because he was buried on Georgia's depth chart for a while, then had to go to Toledo, Arkansas. I think you seem to be getting now more of these guys who can eventually find an opportunity to show up and play and have a good season, but it might take a while, and you might get more of these guys sort of hanging around for a senior season and still being really good at the end of it.
I think it's had a positive effect, on these players, on the pre-draft process, on the Senior Bowl. I'll speak specifically to our game. I mean, it's keeping guys in. There was before NIL, a lot of guys were making questionable decisions on whether to stay in school or leave, based on a lot of family needs stuff. Let's face it, a lot of these guys are coming from family circumstances where they just need to help, mom and dad, keep the water going or lights on. And even if you're getting 10 grand in NIL money or 15 grand, whatever it might be, that might be enough to keep you in school. So I think that has increased the numbers. Going into the first couple of years here at the Senior Bowl, we'd go into the fall with about 500 names on the board. Through the COVID year, that swelled up to 700. So we're dealing with a bigger number now. That went down a little bit. It went down a little bit this year. So I think we're getting back to normal that way a little bit. But I think it's had a positive net effect. The hardest part, guys, and you know this, is tracking these players and knowing where they're going to go. I mean, even in the coaching, like the quarterback carousel this year, I was just on the phone with a coach at Florida this morning, and he told me that Graham Mertz from Wisconsin is in Gainesville now. I totally lost that one. I didn't realize he was. Graham had made his way to Gainesville. So,
as a Gators fan, I'm fully aware.
Tracking the players and knowing where they are right now, that's a huge challenge.
And that's, road scouts and everybody that's, trying to go to a school, in the spring and all that stuff, trying to keep track of who you're even looking at.
Right.
You mentioned your process a little bit, right? You start with 500 players on the board. How do you even get it to 500? There's literally over 1,000 eligible players. Way more than that when you think about all levels. How do you find your the couple D2 prospects that show up every now and again? So what does it look like for you? You only work like 3 days a year, right? Just you just only work in January, right? That's it. When everybody comes down to the Senior Bowl. What does that whole process look like, whittling down the players in the game?
Yeah. We have this game every year in January, and then it's we pack it up and chill out for the rest of the year.
Just do podcasts.
Great game.
Yeah.
No, so we started. We've been on the 2024 class since probably around Christmas time. Once we had our roster pretty much set, there was no sense spinning our wheels and rewatching these guys for this year. So our in-house scouting staff has moved on. Started watching 2024. We're almost wrapped up with all the Power 5 guys, and what they'll do is they'll just start with a depth chart and start working the 2 deep. and watching all the guys, the returning starters, the returning role players, if they were a third receiver, third corner, some sort of sub-package player. And then for the lower level guys, the FCS and D2s, we'll start with All-American and All-Conference lists, and that'll, we'll get jumping on that in May and June. And really for the small school guys, I mean, honestly, a lot of it just comes from our contacts in the NFL. We've had a couple of D3 players over the last couple of years. Quinn Miners, everyone remembers Quinn and his big belly hanging out of his jersey from Wisconsin Whitewater a couple of years ago. And then the year before that, we had Ben Barch from St. John's in Minnesota. I mean, there is no way that we would uncover Division III players, here working out of our office in Mobile, Alabama, if it weren't for an NFL scout giving us a heads up. Now, we need to watch the tape and make the evaluation, but so that's kind of how it all comes together, and it's a long process. And then in the fall, we bring in our area scouts that we hire, guys that get let go in the NFL firing cycle here coming up after the draft. So it's year round, but right now we're kind of in that mode where we're really kind of setting the initial board. I think we have 400 names. We haven't moved the board over yet. We got to take all the tags down, but we're ready to put up the 2024 guys here soon.
So I see you've got a Hendon Hooker jersey hanging above you there in your little Reese's Senior Bowl studio, which is very nice, by the way. It's outshining our studio here. What do you make of his stock? Seems to be soaring right now. I saw Lance Zierlein had a mock draft that had him high, not maybe the most recent one. Somebody, Mike Tannenbaum, your buddy Steve, had a mock with him going five to the Seahawks. Like, his stock seems to be going through the roof. And we've talked before in this podcast about just the difficulty projecting play from that kind of offense, that kind of extreme college-y type of offense to the NFL, where the asks are just so different, right? So it's not that we know definitively that he can't do X, Y, and Z. It's that there's a huge question mark there relative to some of these other guys. So how do you project guys like that from that offense? And how important is things like, the Senior Bowl experience, where practice and the environment is different? You get to see them, exposed to to more X's and O's, to just different things.
Yeah, I'll try not to be too long-winded on this one, but there's a lot to dig into with that question. I'll say this, for Hendon's sake, I hope he's rising, man. I really do. He's an awesome young man. I had a chance to be around him a little bit last summer at the Manning camp, then went up to Knoxville in August, and Coach Heupel had me speak to the team and spend a little time there. And we made an exception this year, man. Like, we don't want to get in the habit of bringing injured players to the Senior Bowl. I don't think that's good for business at all. But Hendon, to me, was a special case. He earned it. He was kind of one of the faces of college football this year. He was playing great, would have been in New York for the Heisman had he not had the ACL. And then the quarterback position itself, I just think, lends itself more to the interview process and in the meeting room time. I thought he really could have helped himself there. So I hope he is. You look back at last year and man, there was, everyone's got like mock draft, 47.0s by the time we get to the draft. But there was a pretty notable draft prognosticator last year that came out with his last possible mock draft, had Malik Willis going number 2 to the Detroit Lions, and he ended up going in the 3rd round. So we don't know. I hope for Hendon. I will say this, it is a bit of a difficult projection from that offense, and I'll carry that over even to like Jalen Hyatt. We're trying to circle the wagons here internally and watch some of these, juniors that are being ranked really high. He's a tough eval, man. I mean, you don't get to see him do a lot of NFL carryover stuff. So to me, the benefit of Senior Bowl week, and not specifically to Tennessee, but to a lot of these players, is that they're asked to do something here that maybe they weren't asked to do in college, right? So I think that, the transfer portal has been huge for the players, but there's almost a transfer portal system going on with the coaches right now. Like, these players are all getting recruited to go to a school, and then 2 years later, the coach is gone and a new guy comes in, and the player probably doesn't even fit that system. So, an example I like to use is Jalen Petrie last year from Baylor, the safety. When he was at Baylor, he was used as kind of a low overhang player. That's why he had 17.5 tackles for loss or whatever he was. He's always, darting in off the edge. And then he comes to Senior Bowl week and he's playing from depth. He's playing off the hash. You see him in man coverage. So it really helps clean up that evaluation. That's why it would have been great for Hendon to be healthy this year and go through the week at the Senior Bowl and run a more pro-style system. But back to your original question, I don't know if he's rising or not. I hope he is. I do think it makes sense for teams to trade up for a quarterback and get that 5th year. when I was with the Seahawks, we were on the clock, and John Schneider made a trade with the Vikings, and they moved back in and took Teddy Bridgewater, and we got out of the first round that year, and to get that 5th year for Teddy. So again, I hope it happens for Hendon. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, a couple of the stats that we've used to describe Hendon Hooker and Jalen Hyatt here. Hendon Hooker, because we track everything here, 15 times he's had to get to his second read. He actually started on one side of the field and then worked to the other side of the field. The offense simply doesn't – it doesn't mean he can't do it. The offense simply doesn't ask you to do it. And the offense does such a good job of creating the one-on-ones on the front side, you throw the one-on-one, right? And then Jalen Hyatt's the beneficiary of those one-on-ones. He's faced press coverage about 67 times, I think was the number, where most other corner receivers are over 200 in their career. So it's just things that you're going to see at the NFL level that you haven't seen in college, and it does make for the projections really difficult. Staying on the quarterback theme at the Senior Bowl, though, how much is the challenge learning the system within a day, right? And then going out to practice and all that, because there's so much precision needed between quarterbacks and receivers and all that stuff. How have you seen the quarterbacks who have gone on to have success at the NFL pick up the system and just have success at the Senior Bowl, and that, show that they can learn a system, get on the same page, and just do it quickly? Because I think that's a challenge as well.
Really good question. I think a lot of people overlook that. No, it's a challenge for these guys. I mean, learning. I'll even bring it to this. I think it was my first year here at the Senior Bowl. It was the year Daniel Jones and Gardner Minshew were in the game. I remember Minshew texting me on player arrival night, and he wanted to get the cell phone numbers of all the centers just so they could go down in the player lounge and work on under center snaps.
That's great.
So, I mean, there's a lot of different levels to it. Of course, they're pared back playbooks. I mean, I should go upstairs and grab one. I could show you how they're not. It's not like a voluminous playbook by any stretch, but still, there's a lot of learning to be done and getting in a huddle and spitting out verbiage. Again, bringing it back to that first year, I remember John Gruden, and I think everyone knows what that West Coast system with John, what it was all about. I mean, it was tons, and Daniel Jones struggled those first 2 days. Man, I was worried about him. I mean, just getting the calls out. What we try to stress to these quarterbacks is like, man, the league is going to be patient with you. Like, just get better every day, which Daniel did. And he was MVP in the game, and whatever. And they went on to say they drafted him because of his Senior Bowl performance and all that. But so there's a ton on the quarterbacks. But in getting on the same page with the receivers, all that, it's a challenge. But the guys that can navigate it. And again, one last story. I mean, I think Mac Jones is probably the guy that did it best. I mean, he was the first guy, maybe the only guy that we've had that on day one, he came out, the ball was coming out on time, like he knew where to go with it. There was no indecision. He has probably stood out above all the other guys in the last 5 years we've had that really got it on day one.
What do you make of this Mac Jones talk the last couple of days that there's tension there in New England, that they might be looking to trade him, that I think originally it was Chris Sims maybe had the report during the season that he'd kind of gone outside the building, right, to try and find just input from anybody. Like, hey, how can we make this thing better? And the report at the moment, at least, is that that's had lingering effects. But where do you think he is based off the first few years of his career? And what does the outlook look like for him going forward?
Well, you look at what he did coming out that first year. What did they go? 10-7, made the playoffs with, if you look across the league, that roster 2 years ago was probably an average roster. If we're comparing it league wide, it's probably a middle of the pack roster. So as a rookie quarterback to come in and do that, man, that's impressive. I don't know if, of course we all get this time of year, we all get caught up in the tools and what guys look like throwing the ball. That was never Mac's thing. But Mac's thing is playing it from the neck up and did so many good things. So you always want to see that development year one to year two. I think that's, everyone knows the conventional, logic there is, every player, regardless of position, usually makes that biggest jump year one to year two. Well, he didn't have that. He didn't have that. So you can understand why Mac would be frustrated. I don't know what's going on in that building at all. I try to leave these guys alone around draft time. And I have seen those reports, but you could understand why Mac could be frustrated. I mean, he's going from a situation where I think every player would want to build year one to year two, stay in the same systems, continuity, all those things. And then they bring in guys that haven't even coached on that side of the ball, who are good football coaches, but don't have any, play calling experience, whatnot. So you can understand the frustration. I'm just happy for Mac that now he's getting Bill O'Brien and there's going to be familiarity. and hopefully he can get back on track, because after that first year, I don't care, any rookie quarterback winning 10 games, man, that's impressive.
I want to stick with the quarterbacks for one more question, and then we'll get into some other positions. But two guys who did not end up going to the Senior Bowl: Stetson Bennett from Georgia, Will Levis from Kentucky. What are your thoughts on Stetson Bennett, who had this incredible college career, and then a guy like Will Levis, who I think is starting to become a little polarizing? And is he going to be the one of the top 4 that ends up dropping in the first round, or do teams still love him? What are your thoughts on those two QBs?
Yeah, Will was an easy guy for us. Didn't even really watch a lot of senior tape on him. It's one of those things, once you want a guy for an all-star game, like, why spin your wheels and keep watching all the tape? So didn't even watch a lot of this year's stuff. Had to go back a few weeks ago and watch some of the 2022 stuff on him. It's probably what everyone else says. I mean, if you buy into Will Levis, you buy into the tools, you buy into the upside and the arm power, and he's a pretty good, he's an above average athlete. You're buying into all that stuff. Now, where I think you have to be careful, and I've seen this a lot, even going back to last summer, was the Josh Allen comparison. Josh put it all together. And I think that people had questions, about Josh and could the accuracy come around and those things. Now, and it did, but I wouldn't. He's a little bit of an outlier that way, and I wouldn't be comparing players to an outlier. I'd be careful there. And then with Stetson, man, going through the fall, even when we did our calls with the 32 teams back in November, teams had mostly free agent grades on Stetson. And then when we had a couple things happen, like when we didn't get Will Levis, Will was kind of playing it by ear with his foot injury. And then we get to January, and he and his reps were like, Jim, he's just not going to be healthy enough to go. We had a spot open up, so circled back, wanted to hit teams back up. Hey, what are your thoughts on him now after this college football playoff run? And now it was 6s and 7s. He had worked himself up into a draftable range. And then everything happened after the season and the tragedy there at Athens. So I'm not judging Stetson. I think it would have helped him to come down here and interview with teams and be around the league and show off his arm, because I think he's a better athlete than he gets credit for. I think he's got a better arm than he gets credit for. I really think he should have come and showed that. But again, there was a lot going on there in Athens, and I wish him the best moving forward.
He feels like a guy that, I think a lot of people quite like his tape more than maybe they think they would. I told you that I kind of knew going in that I was going to end up liking his tape and did, but I've talked to other people who really like him as a potential. Obviously he's unlikely to be a starter down the line just based off where he's likely to get taken, but I think there's a lot of people that are really coming around to loving Stetson Bennett's tape.
He plays the position well, man. That's, again, where we all get caught up in the tools and the traits right now. But, bottom line is, with quarterbacks, do they play the position well with 21 other moving parts on the field? And he does. He's got really good instincts. Again, he throws well on the move. He's got a better arm than he gets credit for. I actually thought he would run a little better at the combine. Talking to the guys at Georgia, I thought he might be in the 4.5s. I think he ran 4.7s, and he didn't even look like he was really trying on that 40. There was no strain to him. I think he plays faster than that. He runs away from DBs on tape. So does he have enough to be a really, a good career backup player? I do. I do. I think he makes good decisions. He understands that system. So I'm with you. The tape's better. Again, I think everything about him is better than he probably gets credit for.
That was our conspiracy theory, that he deliberately tanked the 40 because he didn't want to get labeled as, one of those dual threat type of quarterbacks.
Didn't want to be Rich Gannon. Didn't want to be
our former colleague Zach Robinson, right? That's what he did. He deliberately tanked his 40 and only ran like a 4.6 something, because he didn't want to be seen as that, athletic dual threat running quarterback.
They were saying on the combine broadcast too, they're like, watch, Stetson's going to run fast. And it's like, oh no, he didn't do it.
But he really did look like he was jogging.
Yeah. He's like, no, I'm a quarterback.
He really did. I didn't know you guys had that conspiracy theory, but I'm kind of buying into it.
Yeah.
All right. So I have one follow-up, because Jim, you've been scouting for many years, right? And from a quarterback perspective, did you get caught up? How have you evolved your quarterback evaluations through the years? It felt like there was a big lull in the big Toolsy quarterbacks working out for a while. The projects haven't worked out for a while. And then, so whatever you think of Patrick Mahomes, was he a project? There was things to work on. He's gotten better, obviously. Josh Allen, who you already mentioned. I would even say a guy like Justin Herbert, who maybe leveled off in college and then took steps forward in the NFL. How have you seen the big Toolsy quarterbacks evolve a little bit, and are we seeing more of those types hit than what we've seen through the years.
Yeah, I don't know if we're seeing more hit, but I do think all these guys seem to be transitioning. Again, I've done no studies on this, but they seem to be transitioning better. And again, I know that there's no such thing as trickling up, but I think the NFL is pulling some more college concepts. I think you're seeing younger coaches influx into the NFL, being more open-minded. Look at NFL. Just look at the NFL coaching rosters right now. And when I got into the league 25 years ago, you had a lot of 60 and 70-year-old coaches. You don't see that anymore. So maybe you had guys that were a little more set in their ways. Now we're seeing a lot of guys in their 20s and their 30s in coordinator and head coaching roles. So it seems like they're a little more open to pulling concepts from college and making that transition easier. And I think, Lamar Jackson's a great example. I think coaches are just doing a better job of playing to players' strengths, if that makes any sense. Definitely. Than trying to, ramrod a quarterback into a specific system. I think we're seeing, smarter coaching. I don't know. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's kind of where I see the thing going. I just think they're using these guys better.
No, I think that definitely makes sense.
So I always reference the newspaper headline from like 2003 or 4 when it said Michael Vick will run the West Coast offense.
Yeah,
and it's like, oh no, that's maybe not the best idea.
Yeah, teams are so much better now, I think, at using unusual skill set players than they used to be. I want to talk about wide receivers for a little bit because it's a strange class overall in that, you hear a lot, there's no Jamar Chase in this draft class, as if that's a reasonable bar to set in the first place. But it feels like maybe the top guys are not necessarily maybe as good as a lot of other classes, but I think there's a ton of strength and depth. And as soon as you get into the second, third round, there's all sorts of guys that I find myself liking, a lot of whom seem to have been at the Senior Bowl. Tank Dell was my number 4 wide receiver when we did our rankings. I really love Jonathan Mingo as well, Michael Wilson. Like a ton of these guys, I think, ended up having really, really impressive tape and yet are generally on the consensus board lower down than some of the other players.
Yeah, I think what happens inevitably with some of the underclassmen, again, it sounds biased. I work for the Senior Bowl. I get it. But I just think with some of these underclassmen, they come out, and because they come out, there's just this assumption that they are the top guys at their position. And so for me, it's a little different. I don't get to watch these guys until, I don't watch them until we get through the Senior Bowl. And then the narrative's already been set. Like when I worked in the NFL, I wasn't on social media. I didn't have a Twitter account. You try to block out all the noise, you make your eval for yourself. And then, once you have a firm opinion on a player, then it's okay to see what else is out there. But because of this job, you guys know I kind of live on Twitter, unfortunately. And so I know the narrative on these players. And then when I go to watch some of them, I'm like, man, I can't believe this guy's been being talked about as first round pick. And I think there's a lot of examples in this year's wide receiver class of that. And I think you named 3 from our game, and I would add Jaden Reed from Michigan State. That's another guy that I don't think is being talked about enough. Again, from an NFL's perspective, the Mingos, the Tank Dells, all these guys that Michael Wilson, I thought had an unbelievable week. I think he's very underrated.
Yeah.
They've seen it, right? They've seen him against press coverage. They've seen him against some of the best corners in this draft class. They've seen him at the top of routes. They've seen the play strength. They've seen all this. So what you're trying to do as a staff is just erase the blind projection. And Steve, you hit it on it earlier, like it really becomes a projection. So if you haven't seen it, we used to call those blind projections. So that's what the All-Star game process can do, is just eliminate that, wipe that out. You think Cody Mauch can play center? Well, then he comes down in Mobile and plays center and looks good at it. Okay, well, now we know he can do it. So, yeah, this receiver class, I think that the meat of this class, I think you're going to get a lot of really good number 3 and number 4 receivers out of this year's draft in those 3rd and 4th round areas, maybe even the 2nd. I think there's a lot of 2s, 3s, and 4s. I don't know if there's any number 1s.
Do you think guys like Jonathan Mingo and Michael Wilson are going to get bumped up because so many of the top receivers are a little bit undersized? A lot of the even fringe first rounders, I would call Zay Flowers maybe fringe first, Josh Downs. You mentioned, Sam, Tank Dell is your number 4 wide receiver. You might be higher on Dell than anyone else. These guys are all smaller. Is that going to help Mingo and Wilson, for teams that are looking for a little bit more physicality on the outside?
I think so. I definitely think so. And Tank was whatever he was here, 166 pounds or 163 pounds, whatever he was. So I'll say this. I'm kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth here now, but with the smaller receivers, it's not like it used to be 15, 20 years ago. Like when I got into this thing, you needed guys that could hold up physically and work the middle of the field, and like the Troy Browns. Going back to my time in New England, the Troy Browns, the Wes Welkers. Like you don't need to have that level of substance and physicality. You need some of it, but you don't need as much. It's more of a space game to protect those players. So I get that part of it. But when you're looking at this year's class and you got a Jonathan Mingo who's 220 some pounds, 200 low 220s, and a guy that's in the 160s, or the Zay Flowers and the Jordan Addisons, and those guys are in the 170s. That's a 50-pound difference. And I'll never forget this. Like when I first got into scouting, one of the mantras was it's a big man's game. And I don't think teams get too far away from that. It truly is a big man's game. So yeah, I think Mingo is a guy that when you talk to wide receivers coaches, I may try to make a point on this in a post last week. You talk to receivers coaches around the league, he's kind of the guy right now that they're all pushing for. And then Michael Wilson's another guy because he's a bigger guy. And then both of those two guys are interviewing off the charts. And that's the hard part for what we do right now, is that we're not privy to the interviews and the board work. So we don't know how these guys are coming across from like a football intelligence standpoint. Those are two guys that I know specifically that have really helped themselves on the interview part of it.
Yeah, I really like Mingo. I think he's a massively underrated guy. I think the point you bring up is good, though, that it's definitely not what it used to be in terms of needing that size and physicality. But the last couple of years in particular, we've reached this point now where we're almost testing the extreme boundaries of that size stuff, right? Like Devontae Smith, I think, was the first guy really to come along. Like, I'm 166 pounds, and that's it. I'm not going to try and put on 15 pounds of fake weight before the combine or before the draft. I play at 166, and that's what it's going to be. And by the way, I won the Heisman doing that, so it's fine, right? And that was kind of the first stake in the ground of just saying, look, this is the weight. But people are still, it's still going to scare people away. So what I'm really looking for is, back me up. Why is Tank Dell going to be good despite being 160 something?
I love Tank too. I'll say, just getting back to the Devontae point, because I've seen this. Devontae Smith is exceedingly better than any receiver in this draft.
Yes.
Let's just go there. We talk about outlier, like he's an outlier as well. We talk about Josh Allen being an outlier.
Definitely.
Let's not compare guys in the 160s and 170s to Devontae Smith. His tape was ridiculous. That dude was different now. But I think Tank's going to be successful because of the route running. I mean, he's so quick off the line. He's got a great release package, so he's going to be hard to get your hands on. And then at the top of the route, he's so dang good. And he catches it clean, and he transitions, run to catch really well. So he's just a really, really skilled player. To me, just in terms of skill level, like I think Jordan Addison is a really skilled wide receiver and a real natural and instinctive wide receiver. But I just think there's another level of dynamicism, dynamic ability, if you will. I think I might have just made up a word there, dynamicism.
That's how I say it.
But Tank is different. When you put on the tape, the twitch, the suddenness, he's just he's borderline special that way. So I think he's going to be a really good slot receiver for whoever, kind of rolls the dice and takes a 165-pound guy.
Jim, that's how I say it. I try to say dynamism. I try to say it something like that, and then Sam always corrects me and says it's dynamism or something like. Is that right?
I'm just going to stop you making up words. Yeah.
Because I'm trying to say dynamic, and then you have to add a mism to it. It's a tough one. You had this tweet showing Tank Dell with the scissors release. I don't know if we can get it up on the screen quick enough, but the Senior Bowl one-on-ones. I know. Are you like a dad that you can't root for for one kid over the other? Senior Bowl one-on-ones, they're all your children, right? So if a DB gets burnt or something like that, we don't want to trash him, but you have to highlight when Tank Dell makes the cornerbacks, kind of look bad like he did at the Senior Bowl. He had some unbelievable one-on-one reps, and I think that was, I know that's all you want. That's all you want to see, right? Dominate at the Senior Bowl, and they have your heart. But Tank was unbelievable at some of those one-on-ones.
Yeah, he was, and I do try to be careful with some of this stuff that I post, but I think one of them was against Darius Rush. I posted something on Mingo the other day, and he caught Darius Rush flat-footed and made Rush look bad. But I've also posted some clips of Rush, who had an awesome week as well, where he was really dialed in and had some great coverage plays. But yeah, I try to be careful on who I'm showing getting beat. That's for sure.
We're talking corners tomorrow. Darius Rush he had one of the best and worst reps I think I saw at the Senior Bowl. He had the rough one that you mentioned, but he had that one where he ran the comeback route for the receiver to pick it off, which it didn't look like a skill that Darius Rush has on tape. Although he's more of like a press man type of guy, but it was awesome. We'll talk about him tomorrow though.
Let me jump in real quick. I know I don't know how pressed for time we are.
No, we have all day, man. We have all day. we go for hours here.
Like back to the junior thing, and I think juniors just getting that, just kind of a bump. Like they come out early, we just kind of assume. I think there's two cases in this draft where you look at the same team in the same position. Cedric Tillman was our number one senior receiver on our board in the offseason. I think he's a better player than Jalen Hyatt. I don't see anyone projecting him to go higher than Jalen Hyatt. That's the same team. And then if you look at the South Carolina secondary, you got Cam Smith, who's in a lot of people's mock first-round drafts. Darius Rush is a 6'2" corner, with 33-inch arms that ran 4.36, was the fastest player at the Senior Bowl, and blanketed people all week. And I'm not seeing him go to like the third round. So I don't know. That just popped in my head. Those are two cases from the junior senior split on the same team at the same position group. Like, are we sure we're getting that right in the process right now?
Tune in tomorrow for our quarterback rankings. I will give the proper Darius Rush love on tomorrow's show.
I do think it is a really difficult thing to sort of take yourself out. That's why the thing you were saying when you were with the Seahawks and you were kind of in your own bubble, right, outside of the social media world, you didn't have that outside stuff coming in until after you already had a good kind of firm grasp on these guys. I like the way we do it or I do it personally, where I don't watch a ton of college football until we get to the draft, and then I kind of come at these guys with almost a completely blank slate. But it is very difficult to kind of strip out, well, I know that this guy's being talked about as a really high pick, so there's got to be something there, right? And when you watch the tape, you're like, I don't see it. Or another guy where you think, I don't understand why. Like Mingo was the first one. We're like, I don't understand why he's not in this conversation with the top guys, but I know he isn't. So how high can I put him up my rankings without people just going, no, that's just idiotic. Now you're just deliberately trolling for clicks.
Put Mingo at 3, man. Just put him higher than Hyatt and everybody. Just do it.
So here's an interesting point. I love to talk. The guys in the league talk about this. Like, everyone rips the NFL for missing on, whatever that percentage is. Half the first-round picks bust, right? Or whatever, people rip on NFL teams for busting on first-round picks.
Right.
If you look at the mock drafts right now, they're maybe in a little bit different order, but for the same, we're talking about like the same 35 to 40 guys in every single mock draft. So the same media people that are crushing the NFL for missing on first-round picks, like, they're going to be wrong. I mean, if you're not doing it different in the mock draft stuff, you're going to be wrong a bunch. So anyway, just observations I've had over the years working in the NFL. And the NFL I'm not defending those guys. They miss. I've been a part of teams that shoot. One year in Kansas City, we drafted John Baldwin in the first round. So I've been a part of my misses. But there's just some interesting stuff, like in the whole mock dynamics, man. It's interesting.
I had 2 follow-ups on that, because there is a guy I put in my first-round mock draft that I don't think is getting mocked, and he did go to the Senior Bowl. But really quick, did you ever do this as a scout? Someone told me recently that he doesn't, one of the evaluators in the NFL doesn't actually know the players' names. He only knows them by their school code and number. So he'll be like, hey, that TXUN number 5 or TNUN, that's
Dude, the
Hendon Hooker.
The 4-letter
Tennessee
code.
University.
I can't do that. I can't. Like,
so you do the state first.
Yeah.
But this is like an understood for our listeners. That's an understood code, right? Where how you identify teams. So Tennessee is TNUN, and Hendon Hooker would be number 5.
Right.
So this person would be like, hey, did you see TNUN 5? And I love the way he throws the ball, good zip, got this and that. And so you avoid bias, right? I don't know. That's Hendon Hooker, Heisman finalist, or all that stuff. Did you ever? Is that how you operated where you were anywhere, or did you see that anywhere else around the league?
Not to that extreme, and I've never heard that. I've never worked with anyone that referred to players like that. I'm sure there's some guys that are go to that extreme. I didn't, but I did. What would happen is even here, Like I don't look at any, like if I'm scrolling Twitter and people are putting out like way too early 2024 stuff, I don't pay any attention to it until we get through the guy's work in the off season. And then I'm like, okay, then at the end of the summer, I can kind of go through and see where guys are. But no, that's an extreme to not know a guy's name. And we're going through the draft process saying like, OHST 79 for Dawand Jones or whatever. I mean, that's a little weird.
Yeah, that like I can kind of get on board at the idea of like not doing the names and just saying, right tackle from Ohio State, whatever, number 79. Maybe you could bring me on board at that. The 4-digit like database code though, I can't. No, I'm not.
Well, then my other friend in the league just uses the score. Like when we know we're always talking quarterbacks. He's like, Tennessee. Tennessee's got it. He throws a good ball.
That I can get.
Florida can really
run
it.
A lot. Guys do that a ton.
You just name them by the school.
Just say the school for sure.
All right, so you mentioned Dawand Jones. He's always been one of my favorites in this class, just an absolute monster. The other guy that I wanted to mention, John Michael Schmitz, I put him in the first round the other day, the center from Minnesota, gave him to the Giants at 25. I feel like from a production standpoint, John Michael Schmitz is as good as we've seen at the center position, right up there with Tyler Linderbaum, with Frank Ragnow over the years, but he didn't test as well as some of the other top interior linemen over the last couple of years. What are your thoughts on those couple offensive linemen that have, and John Michael Schmitz also our highest grade during the Senior Bowl, pass protection and run blocking. So we saw a very good performance from him during practice.
Yeah, I'll start with Dawand, man. Like, he's had a weird process because he came down to Mobile and just like put on a show day one and was dominant. And I know I posted a clip that got, ridiculous, like 10,000 likes on social, something crazy. He's got the rare stuff. He's got the 7'5" wingspan and he's got basketball player feet. And, if he just is patient in his pass sets, you can't get around the guy.
Yep. You're
You're certainly not going through him. He's 380 some pounds. So he had a great day and then got an injury and couldn't finish out the week and then just hasn't done a lot the rest of the process. I know at the Ohio State Pro Day, he turned off some teams by not going through the workout. Paris Johnson did, not a phenomenal workout. So that doesn't help when there's a guy in your same position group that goes and a guy that's projected as a first-round pick. So, I'll be curious to see where it all lands. I think talent-wise, he is an immediate starting right tackle in the league. Talent-wise should go at the back end of the first round, somewhere in that 25 to 35 range. I think that's probably where he slots. I think the Orlando Brown comparison is a pretty easy one. I don't think you need to look much further than that. And he's a better athlete. And Orlando's been a great player and had a great career. So it'll be interesting to see where Dawand ends up. And then with John Michael Schmitz, I was thinking about it on the drive to work today. Like, he's one of the cleanest prospects in the entire draft. Like, this is the time of year where, everyone in the media and everyone at the teams, like, this is hole poking season, right? Like, we're all just trying to poke holes and find little flaws in these guys. Well, what doesn't he do or what can he do? John Michael Schmitz, he wasn't an elite tester. He didn't test as well as Creed Humphrey did a couple years ago, who we had in the Senior Bowl and is, a stud. But it wasn't terrible. Like, if you look at the RAS stuff that our guy Mathbaum puts out, it was a decent athletic score, 7 point something. It wasn't bad. But you just go to his tape and you go to the durability. He played in 1 million straight games. I would go back if you didn't think he was quite the athlete or tester you thought. Well, go back and watch him, get out. Watch the initial quickness. Watch the lateral quickness. Watch him reach. Yes. I'm getting ready to post like this clip of him like on reach blocks during Senior Bowl.
Show his reach blocks.
He can do that stuff.
That's it, Jim.
He can do that stuff in his sleep.
Thank you.
So
I am a sucker. I'm a sucker for a good reach block by a center. I've been burned by it before, but it's okay. I'm a sucker for it, and he was so good at it at the Senior Bowl in particular. I'll speak to the person, man. Like, every time I saw him Senior Bowl week, he had a smile on his face. He appreciated the process. He loved being here. He's crushing the interview stuff. He's so good mentally. Like, you talk about a guy that you're going to be like plug in year one, and he's going to be able to handle everything. He's going to be able to take it over from the quarterback if you need him to. If you're a team that needs him to like take some stuff off the quarterback's plate, you're going to be able to do that his rookie year. So to me, if you're in the 20s, you're drafting a 2-contract starter. In what more of a slam dunk first round pick is that? So I think he's going to be one of the top tier centers in the league.
So you were telling us before the show that you think this running back group isn't getting nearly enough love. We haven't talked enough about running backs ourselves in the show, but the entire focus has kind of been about, Bijan Robinson, what a special pick or what a special prospect he is, how high could he go, and then you're hearing a little bit about a couple of other guys. But you're right, like the overall running back class, generally, I don't think is getting enough focus.
And I think you can tie it back into free agency and why some of these guys, like Kareem Hunt hasn't been signed. There's good NFL free agents that haven't been, signed yet. And some of the guys that did, like Rashad Penny, really had to take. There's a lot of guys that had to take, deals that weren't lucrative deals. So, and I think that goes to this class. So obviously Bijan, I watched him yesterday or 2 days ago for the first time. Man, that dude is special.
Yeah.
But I think that next wave, like I was at Jahmyr Gibbs' pro day at Alabama. That guy, haven't watched a lot of his tape, but man, just off the workout, I mean, he's got a ton to him. Tajay Spears is one of my favorites in this draft.
Yep.
Was our practice player of the week here in Mobile. I think you could put a highlight reel together of Tajay, and it might be the best highlight reel in this entire draft class.
Insane.
So. And then you work down the list, the Roshan Johnsons from Texas. I think he's getting really undervalued right now. There's teams that have him in the second round. The Chase Browns from Illinois, Zach Charbonnet. I mean, you can go on and on and on. It's a really good class, man. You're going to, like last year with Dameon Pierce going in the fourth round of the Houston Texans, which if he doesn't get hurt, he goes over 1,000 yards. He's going to be their guy for years to come. That's incredible value in the fourth round to get a Dameon Pierce. And there's going to be running backs in this class that are similar talent to Dameon that are going to be staring at teams in that, that top of day 3 when ESPN and NFL Network put the best available. Like there's going to be a bunch of runners, I think, in that group of players.
And so we've asked this question to a lot of evaluators, former GMs, various people that have been on the show. So where do you stand when it comes to the positional value aspect? We've seen running backs get paid less. We've seen fewer of them go in the first round. Bijan, of course, is the best prospect we've seen since X, whichever player you want to list, Saquon Barkley or Adrian Peterson, whatever you want to say. Either through your experience or your own opinion, is there a too high spot to pick a running back, or are you just so locked into this guy's a special player, give me the special player, I don't care if it's 10, I don't care if it's 15, 5. Where do you stand on running back value, picking them in the first round, and how you separate players and their value versus what the position brings to the table leading to wins?
Yeah, I hate it for these players, guys. I mean, there's not a more physically demanding position on a football field, and they've been devalued the most. So I hate it for them. I mean, I've spoken to some GMs that say when we draft a running back now, we just want to get one good contract out of them. Yeah. And if that's what we get, great. Then we'll go get a younger, cheaper guy. There's too many examples of, whether it be the Phillip Lindsays or the Austin Ecklers. I mean, there's been too many of these later guys. Elijah Mitchell, who was in the Senior Bowl a few years ago, went in the 6th round. I mean, you get good players late. So I hate it for the top guys, and I hate it for the guys in free agency. But if you're just breaking it down and digging into the data, I think it makes sense to maybe wait. But I'll say this, like when it comes to running back, and I was lucky enough to be around a couple guys like this, to me, what makes them different, I think what makes Derrick Henry different, is if they're tone setters. Like if they bring an identity to your football team, and I just defer back to my time in Seattle with Marshawn. I mean, there's value, there's added value to a running back that gives you an identity. And Marshawn was the identity of that football team, even with the Legion of Boom. And there was a lot of talk in the offseason. I did some shows in Tennessee, and they were talking about trading Derrick Henry and moving on from Derrick Henry. I said, you know what, be careful there, because he makes their defense tougher. Marshawn made the Legion of Boom defense a tougher defense. I think all those players will admit that. So I think that, to me, that's where you go a little bit above, what you see on the tape and the actual talent. If they're a tone setter, if they bring an identity to your football team, I think there's a lot of value in that.
Yeah, Marshawn, I mean, to me, there's only been a handful of those running backs over the last 10 years that I think have that, right? I think Marshawn's certainly one of them. Derrick Henry certainly one of them. I think there's elements of Dalvin Cook, like when he's on. Not so much identity, but just you could see the value there where he could take over a game. But there's not many, and I think that's where the risk is. Bijan certainly could be that guy.
Yeah. How much do you think that the value of running backs is being affected by – we've almost seen like the death of the bell cow running back. Everybody's using a backfield by committee now. There's more space now for a bigger variety of body type, skill sets, all that kind of thing. I wonder how much of that value being driven down is the fact that not that many teams anymore use the 300-plus carry guy who's going to be an every down player, be your entire offense going forward. Now everybody's kind of doing it with a jigsaw puzzle of a backfield.
I think you just nailed it right there. That's what it is. You get into draft meetings, and this is the time of year where the scouting department will bring the coaches into the product, bring them into the fold, and the GM will ask the offensive coordinator point blank, like, what's the play snap percentage for this guy going to be, right? And then if it's only going to be 40%, well then how high can we take that guy? So I think that's what it is. I do think where you see the guys being valued the most at that position are the guys that can flex and play some receiver. We're seeing it, kind of the opposite with Debo. He's kind of the opposite of that. But with the running backs, then you can the Christian McCaffreys. I just go back to remember watching him at the combine do the wide receiver drills. Yeah. Any of these runners in this year's class, I think we had one in Mobile and Kenny McIntosh from Georgia. Some of these guys that have legitimate wide receiver flexibility that can go out there and create a mismatch. Then you maybe bump those guys up a little bit, but it's an interesting position, guys. I mean, we could go on and on. I mean, running back's a really interesting one right now when it comes to a value standpoint.
I fell in love with Chris Evans, the Bengals running back, at the Senior Bowl because of his one-on-ones, and I know poor linebackers are on an island in some of those one-on-ones, and they're kind of made to look bad. But Evans looked really good catching the ball, and I thought the Bengals had have a find there, and Evans catching the ball in the backfield. So we're ranking our cornerbacks tomorrow, but general defensive backs overall, love watching those guys at the Senior Bowl, love watching the one-on-ones, the interactions against some of the best receivers. Who are some of the defensive backs who have stood out to you, especially throughout the Senior Bowl process?
Well, we talked about Darius Rush from South Carolina a little bit. Julius Brents is another guy from Kansas State, was probably a really big riser coming out of the week. I think we had him in the 4th round coming in Senior Bowl week, and there's always a bunch of guys that show up here better than John Michael Schmitz showed up a little better than I thought he would during the week too. So there's always guys that are they're usually not like way better than we thought, but there's always a handful of guys that are definitely better than we thought. Julius being one of them. It's just, you talk about like rare stuff. He's got the longest wingspan I think of any corner since we started doing the wingspan measurement about 15 years ago. And really where it stood out was the movement. I don't think anyone expected a guy that tall and that angular to be that efficient and fluid in his movements. Competed his butt off.
Really quick, can I add some context to that?
Yeah.
Julius Brents from Kansas State. So you mentioned 34-inch arms. That is 100th percentile. That is number one in our system. 4.05 20-yard shuttle. That is 89th percentile. And then the three-cone, 6.63. 97th percentile for a guy that's 6'3" or so, right? So much like Tariq Woolen last year, there are no comps for this size, wingspan, movement skills. Ran a 4.53, so a good 40, not great. Sorry, carry on about Julius Brents, but I just wanted to add some context. Like the vertical jump, 97th percentile, broad jump, 100th percentile. The workout is off the charts.
Yeah, 11.6 broad, 42, whatever, vert.
Yep.
So we're talking rare stuff. That's great context. I appreciate you jumping in. Again, here's another guy because we started him off, and like I said, we had him in the 4th. But now that we have all the data in, like, why aren't we moving this guy up? Why isn't he being talked about as a first-round pick? We've got mock drafts with corners that are 166 pounds in the 1st round, and we're not even sniffing Julius Brents in the 1st round. Like,
lay off my guy, Emmanuel Forbes, really quick. Lay off my guy. I'm just
make that make sense. And I'm not trying to pick on him, but there's other guys. I'm just saying, Julius. I just know, like, talking to teams, like, he really stood out. And 4.53 is plenty good enough because when you change direction that well and you take up that much space with your length, and again, being around Richard Sherman for all the years I was, man. You put the ball in their vicinity, it's hard to get. You can't throw over them down the field. You can't throw around them. So, the 4.53, that's with the length factor. You can almost it's not scientific, but you could probably shave a good number off that 40 time just based off the length. So he's a guy that stood out. I think some guys in the safety group. I think Sidney Brown is at the safety from Illinois has completely nailed this draft process. Another guy that he just kept getting better over the year. Like going into the year, I had him pigeonholed in my mind as kind of a box safety because he darts downhill and he'll shoot through the box and blow a guy up and he's all rocked up. And you just look at the body type. And then you go through the year and he ends up with 7 picks. And whenever he's around the ball, he finishes on the ball. And then he comes down to the Senior Bowl. He gets matched in one-on-ones and he moves really well and sticks with people. And then he goes to the combine and blows that out. And at top of the charts and all the testing. Like, that's a guy right now to me. Like, that guy's a day one starter. So, certainly a lot of guys in the DB crew that we're probably not talking about, the Sydneys, the Juliuses, we probably should be talking about more.
You said that it's not often that a guy shows up and he's just way better during the week of the Senior Bowl than you thought he was coming in. Who are the sort of biggest outliers there during your time? The guys that showed up and were just much better than you thought they were going to be coming into the process.
I'll start with Quinn Miners from Whitewater. I'll say this: that was the one time in 5 years where I've completely went against the grain of what the NFL had on a player. Remember, that was the COVID year, so Division III canceled football. Yeah. So where you really had junior year tape. He had this. I mean, you thought he had a belly during Senior Bowl week. Like, it was double that on his junior tape at Whitewater. He had really toned himself up in the year. But really, I had the benefit, man. His agent did a great job. He was training down with Duke Manyweather in Dallas with Rashawn Slater. And the agent kept sending me videos of the two guys taking reps one after the other. And, I knew what we thought of Rashawn. He was our top-rated tackle that year above Penei Sewell. We loved both those guys. But and then you're watching him rep, and Quinn just like, wow, this doesn't look that far off. And you saw the body changing and everything. But still, there was a hesitancy. Like, man, this guy's a Division III player. Like, what's this going to look like against guys from the SEC and the Big Ten? And in that year, all the teams, the majority of the teams, there might have been a couple teams with 7th round, like glass half full grades on them, but most everyone had PFA grades. And when we want to stay out of round 6 and 7 at the Senior Bowl. We really want to stay like 5th round and higher. So if the league feedback is consistently 6s and 7s, we'll usually pull off a guy like that. But with Quinn, I just felt like we needed to bring him. Like, the league needed to see that Division III player against good competition. So he sticks out. Terry McLaurin sticks out. Again, I've raised my hand on that one. Like, I love Terry. I mean, but we invited him greatly off his special teams tape. Watching him as a gunner on punt team, you saw the speed, you saw the physicality, you saw the competitor. So that's where I really bought into Terry McLaurin. Did I think he was going to come down here and be uncoverable? I didn't see that. So those two guys kind of stick out. I think we had Terry in the 5th round coming in a Senior Bowl week, and he ended up in the 3rd. And now in hindsight, he's a guy that should have went in the 1st round. Like, why did it take to the 3rd round to take Terry McLaurin? I mean, he wasn't even the first Ohio State receiver drafted that year. It was Paris Campbell, because I think everyone just stuck with the pre-draft, the pre-processed narratives. Paris Campbell was thrown way up there, and Terry was down here, and I think there's a lot of examples of that. But sorry to be long-winded on that answer, Sam.
Jim, like I said, we have all day. You're the one who has to go, so I know you have a couple minutes here, but we love talking prospects, the process, and the whole thing. I want to wrap up with this. When it comes to the Senior Bowl, you hinted at it a little bit. What's your goal, right? When you're looking at these players, is it to do a service for the league, for the players? What are you trying to do when you get these players, and what does success look like for you? At the end of the day, it's like, hey, we did well, we hit on this, or we can improve. What is that? What are those goals for you as director of the Senior Bowl?
Yeah, really, I feel like I serve two groups in this role. One, I'm a steward to the city of Mobile, Alabama. This game's been here. We're going to be celebrating our 75th anniversary here next year. So this game means everything to our community. I think you guys feel that when you come down here. The community takes a ton of pride in the Senior Bowl. So first and foremost, I serve the city of Mobile, and then I serve the 32 general managers. In these 32 clubs, they've got a lot. Those guys have a lot of responsibility to their clubs and to bring the right players down here. So is it always the best 120? Usually in most cases. But if they feel like they need to see a smaller school level player or, a bigger school player, even back in the day, like Jimmy Graham got a Senior Bowl invite, and he was the 3rd tight end that fall at Miami. I remember scouting him. Yeah. I think I was with the Patriots at the time or the Chiefs. So like they brought Jimmy to Mobile, and Jimmy had a great week, but the league needed to see Jimmy. He was the 3rd tight end, down there at Miami. So there's cases like that where maybe we don't truly stick to our board because we know the league needs to see them. Kind of like, Tyson Badgett this year from Shepherd. Like the league, could we have brought in Aiden O'Connell or Dorian Thompson-Robinson from UCLA, and those guys we could have, but the league needed to see Tyson Bagent, from Shepherd University, a Division II player, against the best competition. So the end goal, guys, is just to get as many guys as we can get drafted. It's been 106 each of the last 2 years. Kind of stuck on that number, but that was 40% of the entire draft class 2 years ago and during COVID, and last year was 40% of the draft class. So so we'll see. We'll see when we get to April, but that's really kind of the mission of what we try to do here.
Well, we appreciate all your time, Jim. You are doing a great job down there at the Senior Bowl. I encourage all of our listeners, make that an event. Go down to Mobile. Yeah. If you're an aspiring evaluator, there are hundreds, almost maybe over 1,000 people that are end up credentialed down there and covering it. So it is very friendly to media, future media, but also fan experience and everything that you guys do down there. A lot of fun down in Mobile. So, Jim, we appreciate it. And, we'll have to do it again sometime.
No, and thank you guys for having me on. Let me say this. Thank you for the partnership, guys. Like having PFF as a resource for us has been absolutely huge in our process. I probably should have said that from the get-go. This relationship way predated me. I think it goes back to Phil Savage. I remember PFF being on the second floor of the hotel down here in Mobile, and you guys were trying to, make your connections with the NFL teams. I think it's been a really cool relationship over the years. But having the ultimate stuff and the ability to filter tape and really streamline our process, guys, we thank you a lot. We give you a ton of credit. So thanks for having me on, and would love to do it again.
Yeah, thanks again, Jim. And we appreciate the partnership as well. It's been great. So
thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Jim. Appreciate it, man.